How come you don't have your picture on there, Steve? Come on.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Today's webinar is going to be on the Autologue computer system, specifically the physical inventory tools. Today's presenter is Bob Fasano, and I'll be helping him a little bit. We're both trainers for the Autologue system, so we're fairly passionate about inventory control and all the tools that you use to manage your inventory. And this class today is going to be fairly involved. It's something that's extremely important. Bob will tell you the importance and go from there. Okay, Bob, go ahead.
Good morning or afternoon, everybody, depending on where you're located. Basically, what Steve said is absolutely correct. With any management system that you have, no matter what it is, the two most important things that has to be accurate is your quantity on hands and your pricing.
Show your screen, Bob.
Sure. Okay. So basically on the Autologue, we want to talk about one of the most important things, and that's accurate inventory. Okay. And I'm sure everybody knows. I want to make sure that they know basically how to even get into physical inventory tools. Going into inventory, you have options F1, F5, F6. F6 is inventory tools, and it'll take you to a new menu. Okay. A couple of things we want to talk about here. I mean, I've known customers that have been on the Autologue for years and never even realized that there was an F6 key there. The whole idea of physical inventory tools is to allow you to take an inventory very quickly and easily, very accurate, okay, even give you an audit report of any changes that you made so that you can make sure that you verified that those counts are accurate. A couple of different ways that we want to discuss about this is basically there's some user variables, okay, that you'll want to consider before you really get started on this. Number one, and one of the most important things is, do you want to look up, do you want this report to print just what you stock? We want to kind of define stock parts versus non-stock parts. And I'll show you how to actually make those changes and how to get into the what we call our user variables, so that you could change from one to the other. There are times that you'll want to have everything come up, and there are times that you're just going to want what you stock to come up. Okay, so a non-stocked item is an item that basically has no quantity on hand and zeros in the min and max fields. Okay, that would be considered a non-stock item. A stocked item is anything that has a quantity greater than zero in the quantity on hand field, or a quantity in the min one max one field. Now, to make that change very, very simply, okay, you would go to number 13 off the main menu, which is our system commands. You would go to number 9, specify system setup options. All right, it opens up a configuration files menu. It defaults to file, and that's where user var options are at. You would hit a return. You'd hit a return again to open. There's our user variables coming up. We'd hit that. A quick way to get to the physical inventory tools is just to put in the letter P until, hit P twice, and it'll take you into PIT. Okay, and there's some setup here. We're going to go through this CC underscore days, underscore years, and all this other stuff. It basically pertains to cycle counting, which we'll get to in just a minute. But as far as no non-stock parts, you'll see that little entry there. You would hit a return. In this particular case, the status is set to 0, to an N. Okay, so in this case, it's going to be calling up everything that we ask, in the line. So if you've got 10,000 part numbers in an inventory management and into a engine management line like standard or something, it's going to print every part number, whether you stock it or not. If you change this status to an active, it's going to filter out all the inactive part numbers that have no quantity on hand or no min-max. Okay, all you would have to do is hit the F3 button. That will change it automatically from an N to an A, indicating that it's now active. You would hit the F10 button to save it. It says, do I want to save my changes? You say yes. And then when you exit out, it'll ask you one more time to save those changes. Now, when I go into my physical inventory tools program, it's only going to call up or bring to the screen or bring to the report just the active part numbers. Okay? I want to go back into our system setup options to discuss two more setups that are important. Okay? So I'm going to go back into number 9, hit file to open, hit to open, just hit enter. When I get in the user bar, I'm going to hit that P a couple times and get back to PIT. I hit my page down key, and that's going to show me a couple things. I want to go to what's called the PIT_IU. And what that gives you the ability to do, and in this case it's active, it basically activates the F5 key when you're in the edit mode, so it allows you to access all the way into the inventory screen, just like a PO does. When you're in a purchase order and you hit the F2 key, it takes you into the inventory. The F5 key in this case takes you into the inventory. I like to have it active, and we'll discuss different reasons why when we get to the editing screen. Okay? The other thing that we want to discuss on this is cycle counting. Okay? And again, I take it up to this point. I'd like to ask if there's any questions so far.
Looks good. Everybody's following along. This information is going to be very involved. Please don't feel bad about raising your hand and stopping us and asking a question. If there's anything you don't understand, please ask, because we wanted to create more of a forum atmosphere for the system-specific webinars, so we can get a lot of participation from the users and a lot of questions, hopefully, from all of the people that are attending the webinar. So please feel free to ask questions at any time.
When we talk about cycle counting basically was a program that years ago was written. Actually, Federal Mogul came to us and wanted us to create a cycle count program that basically will go through and take a random count, depending on how many part numbers you have in stock and what those popularity codes are and how many times a year you want to count them, and it'll pull up a file with a random list of part numbers across your entire inventory that you can count on a daily basis, so that depending on the numbers in your inventory, you basically can count your inventory on more of a daily basis. And if done so, at the end of the year, your inventory is going to be 99.4% accurate. Okay? So depending on how many numbers that you have in the system and how often you want to count them, and we'll discuss that when we get into the selection criteria in just a minute, and I'll show you how this pertains. But this cycle count is asking you, defines the number of working days per year. Okay? This is actually part of a formula, so you can pick from 1 to obviously to 365 days. We set it to 250, figuring you're open 5 days a week. Basically 250, but the higher that number, the less part numbers that you're counting. And what you don't want to do is have a report that's going to ask your guy to count 400 part numbers a day. He'll never get it done. So we can modify these days. We can modify some stuff that makes more sense to you. If I just scroll to the next option, this value is set to 4, and it defines how many number of times per year your A pop codes, your most popular items, are counted on a daily basis. Okay? So you have that ability to set that per each pop code within your system. Now, that brings us to one more point. Okay? And it's kind of important that people's pop codes are set correctly in the system. And by being set correctly in the system, there's 2 types of popularity codes that can be used in the system. A lot of people import the manufacturer's popularity codes. Most people feel like I did in my stores, that what's important to me is whether or not it's an A or a B based upon my sales. Okay, and we have some programs that will also do that for you. I'm going to show you really quickly where that is. If you go into the bestseller report which is 11 off the main menu, and 11 again, okay? This is where you can rank your inventory based upon your own personal percentages and how you feel about them, okay? Right now, you'll see that for any product line, if I do, product line 5 to product line 5, okay, if I can change these to basically indicate what I want them to be. You'll notice that all these things must total 100%. So if you had 100 part numbers in a particular line, okay, the top 23 movers in this case are going to be set to A. The next 22 fastest movers will be a B, and so on and so forth until he reaches 100%, okay? And what you could basically look at this, I think that's a pretty small line, but if I just hit my F7 here, as the instructions say, okay, and I just want to print it to the screen, and I want to rank everything, so I'm just going to hit a return. It'll say this is what they were before, this is your previous, this is your recommended, and basically this one here that was formerly an A, because everything in his system was defaulted to an A, it's now going to be setting it up as a B, okay? So based upon the percentages that I have in there, you can actually look at this and look at your cumulative sales and see, well, my A's right now, the way I've got them set up, okay, will account for 71% of my sales in that store, okay? My B's, my A's and B's together basically account for almost 90% of my sales. Well, in this case, I'm sorry, 95. Okay, and you can modify and do things when you have these pop codes set right. There's a lot you could do with pricing. There are filters. It affects you in purchasing. You could say it's towards the end of the month. I want to just get my A's and B's in. I don't want all these oddball stuff coming in. Some guys order just A's and B's during the week, and at the end of the week order all the rest of the stuff, so that it kind of gives you a little bit of delayed ordering on some of your slower moving stuff. So the bottom line is for cycle counting, purchasing, pricing, having your pop code set correctly is important. That can be another class on its own, but I just wanted to illustrate that is fairly important. Okay. Now let's get into physical inventory tools just a little bit more. Any questions so far? Okay, let's talk about select. Okay, this is going to give you a selection criteria here to where I can choose obviously a single product line.
Bob, your audio just went away. I don't know if it's just me. Everybody hang tight for a minute and Bob can redial in. Mike Proctor's on the line.
Hello?
Too. There you are.
Okay.
We lost you.
For some reason, I just got blown off.
Okay.
We lost your audio for a few minutes there, Bob.
Okay, well, I had to dial back. Yeah, I apologize, everyone.
Okay, take off.
Okay. Obviously, as the list says here, I don't know where I got cut off at, but you can choose a single product line, a product line range, a range of part numbers within a product line. So if I wanted to just print my O2 sensors, and they're all in line in my system, okay, and many times what I'll do is I'll sort it, and then I could print just a range of part numbers. This was something that for the longest time we weren't able to do, but now we can print an inventory report based upon a range of part numbers. Obviously a cycle count, manual entry, negative quantity. If I went into, I'm just going to go to single product line. That's the most common thing we do. Let me just make sure I click on there. Okay. Now, Now we have the ability to use some filters. If there's pop codes that you've got set right, and I just want to see my A movers, I could do that. Use report codes if they're in the inventory, I can do that. And if for those people that are using locations, there's zone bin in there. Obviously, it defaults to no. If I change any of these to yes, it's going to ask me what pop code or what report code or what zone bin, and basically filter them accordingly. So if I just hit a no here, okay, and I enter in the product line number, it's gone through and it's pulled all those parts out, okay, and put them into a file. And what it's basically has done is at that moment of time, it's taking a picture of that product line and putting on the screen an original quantity and defaulting to two other columns, okay? So the idea is this is right before I'm ready to count a line, I'm going to run this count sheet, okay? It took a picture of that inventory at that particular time. It is wise, to try not to sell out of that line for that period of time. Now, in my store, I used to all the time because I would run other reports to see whatever part numbers I sold that day, so I can actually go back and double check it, okay? Now, there's numerous ways that you could print this report as well. So you could print it without showing the original quantity, okay? And there's an option in the user bar to do that, and we can go back and show you that. And this kind of forces my count guy to not look and see what it's supposed to have, but to write down a quantity that he actually counted. Okay. Some people would like to say, okay, this is what you're supposed to have, double check it. All right, maybe you only see 12 on the, or 4 on the shelf, but there's some up on top, and it's preferences. Many people want to do a blind count. There's a few advantages and disadvantages to both. If you're doing a blind count on a small line, it's not a problem. If you're doing a blind count on a large line, it forces you to look at a lot more numbers when you're editing it. Okay. Basically, if after it was counted, I found out that this Parts Master Global, whatever it is, I've only got 12 of them, and I enter in a 12. You'll notice on the right side of the screen where it says the difference, okay, there's a -5 in there. In other words, we're telling the system, we're updating the quantity on hand in the system from that difference column. So if they go through and count that line, all right, it doesn't matter when you update this. It's only going to take 5 off the inventory. So once it's counted, you can sell all you want, and your inventory will be accurate because it's not putting in that now column. It's actually deducting 5 from that inventory. If I had, if this one turned out to be 27, and you'll see that as a +5, okay, it's going to just add 5 or deduct 5 depending on whatever count you put in there. There's a -1 or -31. I had 21 of these, okay? And then once I update this count, it's going to give me a audit report of just the numbers that I changed so that you can go back and check them.
Bob, you might want to just touch on the F screens at the bottom of the screen before you get too far. Just so people can understand what all the fields are on the screen.
Mm-hmm. And I plan on getting to that. Thank you, though.
Okay.
Okay. The basic premise of this is it takes a picture of the line, you count it, go ahead and sell all day, and if you don't get a chance to update this till the next day or that night or 2 days later, it's still going to deduct those amounts from your inventory and print you a complete audit report to make sure that it's telling you what numbers you could go back and check them. When I basically sold my store and did a complete inventory, I went back and double-checked all the stuff that they said they couldn't find, and basically found a lot of stuff that the reps counted wrong. The instructions at the bottom of the screen, okay. Right now I can toggle between the screen and a print. So if I wanted to print this report and I want it to go to a printer, I just hit the F2 button, and you'll see in the upper left-hand corner my printer changed from screen to printer 99. Okay. All right. So I have, let's see. F3 is just going to get me to a list of my files. Okay. No file was selected. Let me go back into that edit file that I just brought up. Did I lose my data? Oh, there it is. Okay. Now, it still remembered what I put in there, okay? All right? If I want to see oh, why is my F4 is not, oh, there's my exceptions. Okay. All right, there's the full report. I'm not seeing any difference on there's a count sheet. And there's my exceptions, but it's not changing anything on the screen.
The difference is what prints. When you print an exception report, it's only going to print the items that you changed. When you print a full report, it's going to print just what you see on the screen. And when you print a count sheet, it's going to print the count sheet based on whether or not you've selected a blind count or not.
You know, I didn't use that much myself, but let me just pull up another instance of this.
If you just change your printer to the screen, you can run each one and see what it looks like.
And I just did. So, what I'm going to do is just open up another version of this so we can see what those reports look like.
Just hit F2 and it'll go to the screen. You'll be able to go in and out of it like that.
Okay.
Now print your exception
report. Yeah, gotcha. Sometimes you forget, you get nervous. Okay, there's my exceptions. Okay. All right. If I go back, I hit that F4 button again, and you'll see at the top that's the full report. So if I hit the F7 on that, there's the full report.
We do have a question at this point.
Sure.
Paul asked if there are any best practice tips for dealing with parts that are locked up in workspaces. Will these quantities be off? In other words, will they
Remember, this is taking a picture of the inventory. So if you've got them on a workspace and they're already committed out of inventory, they're out of inventory. Okay. What you can basically do is you could run a POW report. Okay, which is print open workspaces in detail and look at some of those numbers. When you talk about best practices, that's an age-old problem as far as putting stuff in a workspace. My guys, and I fought this a lot because we did a purchase order on a daily basis, and today things are a lot different than they used to be. There's a lot more quoting going on. It's not like it used to be where guys would call up and say, how much is it, do you have a starter for an 85 Chevy, send it. And now it's price and availability on that 2002 Ford, and I'll call you back, and then they call you back. So everybody wants to kind of save stuff as quotes. And that makes it a lot more difficult because these guys are relieving inventory. You guys run a purchase order or try to do a count sheet, now you got a problem, okay? My rule in my store was if my guys were doing a quote, and it took me a long time to get them to finally, pay attention to me, but they had to change the quantity to a 0 so that it would retain the part number, retain the pricing, the customer, but it didn't take anything out of inventory. Now with the new features that we have, I would change them all to an estimate.
You have there are some choices you have, Paul, in terms of hold workspaces. You can save everything as an estimate by default. You can selectively save them by estimate, but it's important to know that in answer to your question, anything in a workspace will affect your original quantity. Anything as an estimate will not affect your original quantity. So it's a matter of practice on the counter. If you want, you can give me a call or Bob a call, and we can go over the advantages and disadvantages of saving things as estimates. You can even go to the extent where it won't save any workspaces at all. So there's a lot of options that you have there in terms of how your workspaces affect your inventory.
And by the way, when you do change workspaces to an estimate and you go into the workspaces, they'll be identified with either an E or a W so that you know which stuff is not affecting inventory, which stuff is.
And the newer versions, yes. When you go into when you select your counterman letter, you'll see right there on your workspace list which ones are estimates and which ones are workspaces. And I believe that they're on the newer version. I believe that he's on the newer version.
This is an example of the actual count sheet that would go on a piece of paper. In this case, this is not a blind count, so it gives them the starting quantity. If we set our user bar option to not show that quantity, it'll just give them a count sheet, and they have to go to each one and fill in the blanks. Okay. The difference is when you're editing this, especially on a long line, if it's a blind count, see when I used to count a line, I would basically highlight all the exceptions on the report and just page down to those exceptions and change them, and then print the audit report and double check them. If it's a blind count, you're basically reading every quantity, making sure that it's the same. So it's a little longer, but probably more accurate. Okay, a lot of guys, they get pretty lazy. It all depends, I guess, on how you have to how much you trust the guy who's counting it. A lot of times, as the owner, if I counted it, I wanted the quantity there because I looked all over for it.
Now, a blind count too, Bob. A blind count only affects the person counting. The person editing will see this full screen, and they'll see all the exceptions right out of the gate. The blind count sheet only affects what actually prints to paper.
What prints? And again, if we go into, I'm in this same store, if I go into 13, okay, and number 9, which is basically system options, and I go into user bar, and I call up PIT, I hit my page down, okay, and the last item there is the no count quantity. If I hit that, okay, F3 and make that active, then when I print that count sheet, it will not print the count quantity on the count sheet. Definitely, you will always see it in the edit screen. Does that answer his questions as far as workspaces, by the way?
I believe so.
Okay.
Did that, Paul? Did that answer your question? You can talk.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, a couple of things we want to talk about here. Okay. Obviously, a product line range. If I was doing a full store count sheet and I did from 1 to 255, it'll basically put in 255 entries in there, and each product line will be listed separately. It saves you the time of doing them one at a time, and it takes a picture of the inventory at the time. Okay, so at that particular point, it's just a time saver. Okay, range of part numbers, same situation. You need to know the first part number and the last part number. The same filters are there, and they'll ask you what the beginning number is, what the last number is. And again, usually if you're going to do this, especially on an Autologue, what I normally do is print all my part numbers for that line, an IPL 11-1, to the screen. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll sort it first, make sure all my inventory is in shelf order, then do an 11-1, print it to the screen, find my first and my last number, then I know the range that it's in. Okay? And sometimes when stuff gets put in, it can get out of order. Sorting it, putting it in order, looking at it, getting your first and last number, it'll, you can do a range. Okay? It's pretty self-explanatory. Also in the select thing, and I'm going to just bypass cycle count for just a minute because that's going to require a bunch of discussion here. So manual entry, just what it says. Okay? I could put a part number in. Okay? Line code from any product line. Okay? Oop. How about if I type the right number in? Okay? And I could just put in a bunch of part numbers that way. Now, in my store, and everybody has their own procedures, and, nobody was allowed to go into the inventory and change quantity on hand, okay? It was too easy for them to have a 1 and 1 equals 4 scenario. Too many mistakes. You're asking them to do the math in their head. If they've got a bunch of numbers to do, basically, I want them to go through PIT. This way, there's no problem with typing in the right number. I'm actually putting in a quantity that there's there now, and I have auditing and an audit report that's going to satisfy me later on. Okay, and I figure they still have to call up a part number. I just don't want them to do the math in their head. There's some audit reporting within PIT and within the inventory file that we're going to go through in the utilities menu that basically, when I knew something was done through PIT, I knew it was done correctly. If I saw that somebody changed inventory, I got a real problem with that. Okay? I could tell, I know that was done through an inventory program where someone just going through their head and changing part numbers, that wasn't allowed. Okay? Again, in my particular store, okay, inventory got changed by one of three methods. Point of sale when something went out the door or came back in as a return, a purchase order, and stuff going back to my vendors was a negative PO, stuff coming in from my vendors was a positive PO, and then through PIT. That was the only way. I wanted my computer to always do the math, and it kept my inventory much more accurate. Okay? I'm going to get out of this one. Okay? We're going to go into negative quantity. Okay? Obviously, if I hit this, it's going to go through all my lines and pull out just my negative quantity on hand. Okay? And that's all it's going to do. And again, this is one where if I'm doing negative quantity, I want it to run full bore open. So I will turn off the no non-stock parts. You'll get a different range of part numbers when you have no non-stock parts turned on than you do when you have it turned off when you run a negative quantity. Okay? It looks at that min-max a little bit more carefully. A lot of times we look at negatives differently, but you know, you'll get two different reports if you have non-stock parts turned off. I always run it totally open when it comes to negative quantity on hand. And you could basically update your entire negative quantity on hand, everything that's in the system, update to a 0 with one keystroke, and you could actually print that audit report. And if this is stuff you just want to compare to receipts or invoices that came in, that you know that they were billed, that's one purpose for it.
Parts on workspaces will show up there.
What I did on a regular basis is everything correct. Okay, that's where you got some danger. Okay, if you're doing a negative, you know, you talk about do's and don'ts. If you run a negative quantity on hand report and somebody put a special order into a workspace, okay, and you just blanketly update everything in the system, and then he goes later on and he, you know, releases that part or deletes it off of his workspace, now all of a sudden you got one on hand when you really had 0. So there's some do's and don'ts on this. You want to be careful about this, and you have to have good workspace management to know what you're doing. That's one of the reasons why I have, you know, when I go to the edit screen, and we talked about this as far as in one of the user bar options, if I go into even to that manual part number and I hit the F5 key, it takes me all the way into the inventory so that I can look at stuff. Okay? Maybe I want to change an order point. You definitely don't want to change any quantity on hands here. It's just to get an idea. Wait, I got -6 on this number. What am I stocking? What kind of sales do I have here? Is this in a workspace? What's the situation? So I want to look at the inventory without having to open up another screen. That's what that F5 option is before. But some notes to be careful about is if I run a negative quantity on hand report, it is going to update everything by the difference. And if it's in a workspace and they delete that workspace, it's going to add it back in, and then your inventory is off. Okay? So be very, very careful with negative quantities. Okay? I make sure that I you know, everything that we used to buy out, we used to create purchase orders for, so I had very, very few negative quantities on hand. And when we ran them once a week and managed them very well. Okay? I could run one real quick here if you're has anyone ever used this before? I mean, they need me to run it and see what it looks like?
I think you explained it pretty clearly, because you don't really want to hurt his inventory. Are you on the live system here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, yeah. I think everybody got the idea of what it is. It's a troubleshooting procedure. Lets you know that people are selling one part number and handing a different part across the counter. It happened quite a bit to us because we were real heavy in engine parts. We had issues with oversizes all the time. Somebody would sell a set of 30 rings and give the customer a set of 40s. It was those kind of things are easy to identify when you have two numbers wrong, one over, one under. You can pretty well tell what happened, but it does give you a file to go off of to identify possible problems.
I'm just going to do another way to look at negatives here, okay? I'm just going to get out of here for one.
In stock status, you can see them, you just can't do anything with them.
Well, and everybody's got stuff going into product line 0, okay? I didn't hit that right. It did the negative quantity on hand anyway.
You can.
So I'm going to delete that.
You can delete it.
Okay. Of course you can. I'm just going to do a single line, okay? And I'm going to do product line 0, okay? So when I go into my edit, and there's my product line 0, okay? You'll be able to see if there's any negative parts in here, okay? And I can update them all at one time. I've got to log in and log back off to get all the negatives. This is what I mean about having your no non-stock numbers come up, okay? Let me just get out of here real quick. Do a 20. Maybe he doesn't have any negatives. There you go. See, when I turned off the negative quantity on hand, okay, in other words, I want to see everything, not just the parts that I stock. Now it's going to show up all my negatives in my product line 0, okay? Pardon me, Steve?
No, that's it. You might just touch on when you went and did a 20 from the menu, what that did.
Oh.
So that's a helpful tip.
Okay. What a 20 basically does is resets your function keys and redots what we call the profile. It, like, if you made any changes in user bar options or anything like that, it'll grab those changes. So a 20 is like almost like logging off and logging back in.
It's like an F5 in Windows. It just refreshes.
Mm-hmm. So, and what I did is I did product line 0 because that's where most of your negatives come in, okay? And then basically I can, if I go to update and I choose this particular file, it's going to add 1 to all these items that were negative ones. So without doing anything, I can just update this and change all my negatives to a 0 at one fell swoop. Again, you have to be careful because if there's stuff in a workspace, it will create some problems, okay? So I was very aware of what was going on as far as my workspaces were concerned, and I usually tried to clean this up at a time when I didn't have that much in there, okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Handling negative quantities, there's 2 different ways to do it. You could run it for the entire store, okay, or you can run it for a product line at a time without changing any other numbers in there, just one update, and it'll change everything from a -1 to a 0. Again, if you got workspaces and part numbers that are being relieved of your inventory, if they don't sell them, and basically just delete that part number, it puts them back in stock. Okay. Now, editing. And before I go to editing, I created a bunch of files here already, okay? So I'm going to take you over to the utility menu because I created a whole bunch of files here that I want to get rid of, okay? He's working on, this is the one file that was in there. This is everything else that I've created myself. So I want to delete them, okay? I want to get rid of them. And basically what I do is I go over to my utility menu, okay? And then I'm going to go to delete files, and this is going to ask me a password, so it's, let's see, say it's 27th, isn't it? That password can be turned on and off and customized by customer, so if anyone doesn't know how that works, well, let's ask right now. Does everyone know how that works? I'm gonna assume that everybody knows it. Okay.
And again, this is something that customer service can help with. If you get to the point where you need to change it and you forget how, then customer service can help you with that.
Okay. So once I get into my delete file list, okay, I'm going to hit an enter by every one that I want to delete. So I want to delete that one. You'll notice on the right-hand side I put an asterisk. I'm going to delete that one. 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 Okay. And I'm actually going to delete that one as well. So once I've selected all the files that I want to delete, and I got an asterisk by the ones I want to get rid of, I hit F11. It kind of gives me a recap of what you've chosen. I hit F11 one more time. It asks me, am I sure? I say yes, and now those files are gone. There's only one in there. Okay? Now, that leaves us with the last thing that we need to talk about, because I didn't choose anything. That's why that thing came up, no file selected. But I'm going to go back to select, and we're going to talk about cycle count. Okay? And basically with cycle count, before you even start a cycle count, you've got to do a couple of things. Okay? In that user var file, this is where this gets to be a little, little complicated. You'll notice that in the PIT file, first thing that comes up is the amount of days a year that you're basically open, so it can calculate your working days. The higher the value, the fewer the parts that are going to come up for counting. Okay? Basically, I probably would change that to 365. Okay? And then, but we'll just leave it for that for now for the default. Okay?
And it's important, Bob, that if you put 300 in there, it doesn't mean that you have to count it 300 times in 1 year. It just means that that's the length of your cycle. So the cycle will run itself out. The at list will empty. It creates an at list, and it pulls parts out of it, like Bob said, on a random basis every day up to a predetermined quantity, and he's going to show you how you get to that number.
Mm-hmm. This is, basically this is telling you how many times you want to count your A items, okay? So obviously if you have a ton of A items in there because you've just been load packing stuff based upon, your non-stock numbers or load packs or whatever the case is, it could basically give you a ton of numbers to count, okay? So it's kind of important that you kind of manage your pop codes a little bit if you really want to do this. And there's a lot of customers that do this on a daily basis. They'll get a list of 30 or 40 part numbers, and they have a guy go out and check them. And they double check the ones that are off, and their inventory is a lot more accurate. There's a screen for every pop code, A, B, C, D, W, R, S, and O's, okay? And normally, again, these are values that if I've set my pop codes to be the correct percentages, and I have nothing set for I don't want anything to be ranked a W because I'm not a warehouse, and I'm just ranking my A's, B's, C's, and D's. All my R's, S's, and O's are basically going to come up with, I'm going to put 0 days in there. I don't want to count those at all. I just want to count my stuff that I have on the shelf. Okay? So you can manipulate this in a way to make your counting very, very easily. Okay? Once that's set up, okay, actually if you just use the default, okay, I'm going to go back to my utility menu, and you'll see that there's a cycle count maintenance, a cycle count report, a cycle count worksheet, okay? Well, the first thing I'm going to do really is I'm going to, you would have a password on this. Oops. Okay. I'm going to initialize. I'm going to reset it so that everything is clean. Okay? And it asks me if I'm sure. All right? Then I'm going to go down to a cycle count report. Once that's done, I go to cycle count report. Okay? It's going to ask me if I want it to go to a screen or print. I always default it to the screen. And this tells me right now the way this is set up, using the default 250 days, counting my A's 4 times, okay, it's going to give me a list of 616 part numbers to count. Okay? Totally unacceptable. That's way too much. He's got way too many A's. I bet you that just a ton of these A's are all new part numbers that he's never sold. There's no need to look at any of my, my W's and anything that has a 0 min-max. I'm going to re-rank those, okay? So I basically have to caution you that you want to have your pop codes really kind of straightened out if you're going to really use this program, okay? Now, one of the things you could do is once you've done that and you say that's way too many, I'm going to go into my worksheet and I'm going to say, look, I only want to count my A's once a year, okay, and my B's once a year, and my C's once a year, and my D's once a year. I don't want to count my W's. Oops. I don't want to count my W's, my R's, my S's, and my O's, okay, because I've already ranked those out. And let's go with 365 days a year. Now, once we've set that, let's just do a really quick report and see how that changed things, okay? And now it came up with just a list of 95 part numbers, okay? And you can actually get this thing down where it'll give you 20 or 30 part numbers a day or 20 part numbers a day, something that's manageable that you can hand to a counter guy that says, look, in your spare time, I want you to count these things. So you want to have your non-stock parts turned on, to where it's not looking for anything that's a non-stock. You want to make sure you manipulate your pop codes correctly, okay, and then it'll give you a fairly good count sheet. Once you come up with that, with the numbers, consider those things as a formula in the user variables. Write them down, and then go back to user bar and set up 365 days a year. A's at 1, B's at 1, C's at 1, D's at 1, and W's, R's, O's, and S's, at 0, and then reinitialize the cycle count, and then you'll get a really nice, clean cycle count that you can work with on a daily basis. Okay.
Is everybody good with that procedure?
Does anybody need clarification on that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Anybody that has any questions, please press a little button that raises your hand or type in a question, because this is a very important part of cycle count that makes it either doable or not doable. The difference between having to count 600 parts a day versus 90 parts a day or 30 parts a day makes a big difference. So if there's anybody that's not clear on that and the procedures, the steps that you need to take to get to that, please raise your hand and we'll go back over it, because it's very, very important. Like Bob said, this was written, the algorithm to calculate these actually did come from Federal Mogul, and this program was used in their warehouses to control shrinkage. When it's proven fact that when employees have to do inventories for random items, less of them tend to go missing. So it's a very, very good tool for the business owner or manager to keep your inventory, not only keep your quantities straight, but reduce shrinkage as well.
And the other thing you could do is when you do a cycle count, if you start to notice that certain product lines always seem to be missing stuff, that's your indication that you maybe should do a physical inventory on that line. Okay. The point is, and as Steve said, when your employees know that you're really counting stuff and watching stuff, you do have a tendency to miss fewer items. If you use this program the way it was designed, like I say, your inventory will be damn accurate by the end of the year without having to take a physical inventory. And that was the idea, because with the warehouses that they had, taking a physical inventory of their warehouse was a monumental task. Plus, weren't these originally done in South America?
This is where it originated. Yes, this is where it originated. They initiated these cycle counts primarily in South America, and all the warehouses that we were installing stores, they were doing this cycle count very faithfully every day, and they had anybody doing it, and it's a very, very, like Bob said, it's a very, very useful tool.
Okay, and if anyone has any questions, by all means, that want to set this up and manipulate, pop codes, or want some help on that, I'd be glad to help them out with any of them. Just, I think, is it my email on that on the invitation, Mike or Steve?
I'm sorry,
we
Bob?
can get them that information if they need it. Okay.
Yes.
I said we need to have a way to contact me, or you.
Either one of us. The invitations you get to these webinars is always a good source for a return or to hit reply, and that'll go straight to me. Rich from Neptune just came in, and he's a little bit behind. He requested if you could go just a bit slower.
Oh, I apologize. Would you like to, would he like me to recover something?
We can, Rich. Rich, you there?
I don't have a microphone.
Okay, well, I hear you, but we'll have him keep going. And just so everybody knows, these webinars are recorded, and they will be on our website, so you will be able to listen to it again. But stay tuned in and catch what you can catch. And then if you want anything individually, Rich, we can go in and do a webinar or a go-to-meeting just for you.
Not a problem.
I'll be glad to do that just for you if you want me to.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks. Okay, Bobby, go ahead.
Just another word of caution. I see this in a lot of stores where they'll select a line like a single product line. They'll do product line 0, okay? And they, a couple hours went by, they didn't print it, okay? So they'll run it again, which is no problem, because it takes a picture at the absolute time that you run it at that, but it's really designed, you really should print it at that point and count it. If you're not going to count it for 2 hours, then run the report 2 hours from now. But when you go into these edit files, okay, you'll see that there's 2 files there. And inevitably what happens is somebody will go into the update screen and they will update both files thinking that it's, not going to make any changes. Well, what happens here is that if I have negative quantities on hand in that line, you can see it's going to add this difference to my inventory. So if there's a -1 now and that difference is 1, it's going to really quickly change all my quantities to 0. But if I did it twice and there's another number in there that thinks it was, remember, we're not touching the original quantity. We're just adding or subtracting based upon this difference column. If you update that same, if you update 2 files, you are going to basically add another one to that. Now it's going to show 1 on hand when you're done. So be very careful that if you create 2 files, delete the first one, then create the second one, so there's no chance of updating, because all I basically have to do is go into the update, choose the file I want, and once I put an asterisk by it, it's updated, it's done, and it's going to print you an exception report, okay? I'm just going to hit the F11 key. I do not want to pick any of these files. So no file is selected, okay?
Good rule of thumb is if you're going to recreate a file that was stale, when you know you're getting ready to go in and recreate one, delete the first one before you recreate it, just so you make that a matter of practice and you don't forget to do that.
Counting, okay, or this count file one. The count program is basically to where I'm going to manually go through every part number. So I'm going to pick that, just pick that one line, okay, and I'll hit the F8 button and it'll bring me to the first one. And some people get where they look at that that big edit screen and they have a hard time realizing which one they're doing, well, here's a way to do it on a part number by part number basis, scrolling through it, finding a part number. And if I wanted to make a change, I could go in here, I can hit the F6 key, it'll bring me down to the quantity. I could actually change min-max, cost, and quantity on hand right from this screen. Okay? So I can delete part numbers from it, I can scroll through it, all done. So this is a manual entry. Okay? And really I had to look at this because I never used it. I used it from the edit screen. To me it was a lot easier. Okay? But it's there for those guys that want to use it. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on here, but that's it. Save the file. Yeah. No. Okay. That's what the count program is in, and it'll give you a count sheet report once you've done editing it and give it the same way with the exceptions. So the ability to do all the same stuff in the edit screen, it just does a manual number one at a time. Okay? Create PO. I have to admit I've never used this, and Steve and I kind of pulled our hair out trying to figure out what it was for. Okay? And I actually kind of look at this and I say, really, this is a lot cooler than I thought. Really, I think what it was designed for is I got a new line in, and I just put in a line of whatever, okay? Prime line marine service items or whatever the case is, okay? So I pulled the entire line off the Genie and I load packed everything in the line, okay? Now I get a packing slip from my, or a list of parts, an invoice, whatever, and I want to make sure I get this inventory into the system very, very quickly, okay? If I create a physical inventory count sheet from any line, I can go in there and say create PO. If the original quantity says 0, okay, in the entire line, I can go through and quickly find the numbers that I did get in, put the quantities that came in from the packing slip, invoice, or whatever the case is, and it will immediately create a purchase order based upon what you inputted in the now column. If you have positive quantities in the original column, it'll also put those on a PO. So really, I think it was originally designed by one customer who wanted to do that on a load pack. And I apologize if I'm going too fast. Does everyone understand that?
Good. Hey, no big deal. Hey, I'm sitting on a conference call. I'm just about done. Can I just call you back at the number of the call, please? I'll do it. Thanks. All right.
I'm sorry, I missed something.
That was somebody just talking in the background. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So let me repeat this, okay? If I went into create PO right here, okay, and I picked this file here, okay, it's whatever I have and by the way, this file will go away. I'll have to go in there purchasing and actually delete this, creates a purchase order, and I pick a vendor, okay. I hope that's a vendor. Okay, it's not. I wonder if
you might have Alpha Search from
so we'll search.
Yeah.
Oh, it does. It does. So I just did a special order, okay, and it created a PO. All right.
And hopefully it didn't transmit.
What it basically did, if I go into purchasing, just so you could see. It created the last one as a special order. Whoop, not that one.
I believe it was that one.
No.
You created it as a star special order vendor.
Yeah, but
that's today's date. You gotta look at that file because that was your product line 0 file. Remember?
Oh, that was my product line 0 file. You're right. Okay. So everything that was in that, as a positive quantity on hand, it put into, a purchase order. So,
And it removed the file. It automatically removes the edit
automatically
file.
removes the file. So, you know what? I wonder what it did with the negatives. If
You could look at the other one that you have saved, Bob. You had product line 0 in there twice.
yeah,
And if you look at the edit file, if you look at the edit
that
file,
might be.
then
I just found it. I might have found another use for this.
that's the way Autologue works. It gets more and more useful by the day.
Well, you sell parts all day long. You just, special order stuff you put into product line 0. Now I can create a PO on the fly for all that stuff very quickly, can't I? Okay.
Yeah, if you didn't already, but yes. Now, if you go down to 0, it should match. It should match that PO.
All right. So wait a second. 690. I want to see what it did with the No, it doesn't take the negatives. Okay, it just takes the positives.
Right. The first positive is an H, 15718.
Right.
That's the first one that went on the PO.
Right. So it just takes the positives. Bottom line is it takes whatever is on the original quantity, or if you put something in the now quantity other than a 0, okay, it will put that on a PO too. Okay. So if I looked at all this stuff and I basically did put a 1s in all my, I can conceivably create a PO that way. I think the best use for it is I'm putting in a new line, I load packet, I get a list of the numbers I'm going to get, and it'll go ahead and create a PO for all this new numbers that are coming in, okay? And just so everybody knows, there are utilities that can go through, and once you post that purchase order of those new items that came into that new line, we can basically go into it's a backdoor program, but we have utilities that have to call, customer service or Steve or I or something like that, and we could type a command in that will copy whatever's in the quantity on hand into the min-max fields, so that basically you don't have to sit there and go through and update those min and maxes manually. Okay, so we have a lot of inventory utilities that I think what we're going to have to do, Steve, and you might agree with me on this, is one of these days we're going to have another class on some of the advanced inventory tools that we have available in the log.
Absolutely.
To let people,
that's 2 hours. That's 2 hours on its own. And
right.
I notice we're just about at an hour here today, so we don't want to get too far into that.
So basically what I'm going to do here real quick, because I am on a live system, is I'm going to delete this PO 6389.
See, that shows you how much our customers trust us, Bob especially, that they'll let him order $10,000 worth of merchandise without blinking an eye.
Okay, a couple of really, really quick things, okay? You can get to all your audit reports. This is the same as going into 1117, okay? So you could see your audit reports from here as well, okay? But one thing that's in here is there is in the utility menu, okay, what's called, the reset of the audit file, which will give you the ability, wait a minute. To kind of purge, your audit files. It'll ask you, when if you're doing lost sales, okay, how many days you want to retain. And you could basically say, 365, whatever the case is. If your files are too big, you only want to go to 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. You can basically purge the files yourself and retain just the information that you want or the time that you want to keep those files in there. Okay, so I'm gonna. You might
want to explain, Bob, when this is going into an area that's usually addressed by customer service. The reason that the files need to be purged is because the physical file size gets very large. As a matter of practice, usually customer service will purge that for you. But we gave the customers the ability to purge because if you do a great deal of work, as an example, if you go back in there again, Bob, and you have the audit file that deals with changes to the customer file, or maybe to the inventory file. Maybe you've done some duplication or some massive price updating. Maybe you've decided that you want to change the list price to 2.2 times your cost on every part in your inventory. That's a huge entry to the inventory change file, and you might want to bear that in mind, that when you do that sort of thing, it increases the file size incrementally. So customer service can generally inform you when your files are too big, but this is a way for you to keep track of it if you want. When you go in to look at an audit report, like Bob said in 11 and 17, this is to purge, 11 and 17 is to look. When you go in to look at an audit report and it takes forever to come up, or it could be corrupt, sometimes you'll notice that nothing comes up. You might try to purge it little by little, keep 365 days and see if that fixes it, keep 350 days. Just keep narrowing it down until you get the reports to work. But that's basically the reason why we gave the jobber the option to purge his own audit files. But normally that's a customer service function.
Yeah. It's kind of an advanced function, okay? The bottom line, as far as physical inventory tools are concerned, is that most guys, when they want to count their inventory, they'll run an inventory price list, or an IPL 11-1, and they'll write down all the numbers, and then they'll go in one by one and start changing them in the inventory, doing the math in their head, okay? The whole function of the physical inventory tools is basically to take a picture of your inventory at the time, okay, count it, make your changes, not have to input every part number individually, update all the numbers at one time, and give you a report of what had changed so that you could double check to make sure there was no mistakes. It's a great program. I used it for a lot of stuff, including any errors that I found that I couldn't research down to see. Did I post them wrong? Did I used purchasing activity a lot? The bottom line is that it's an easy way to keep your inventory accurate. And Steve, unless you can add something to that.
I can't, Bob. I just wanted to say that we really appreciate the attendance today, because one of the things that we've been trying to do with all of the webinars is keep our customers informed, but we believe that there's a special place for system-related. Only the Autologue customers got invited to today's webinar, and so it will go for all the different systems that we do. But we wanted to start this series off today of the actual Autologue inventory system with something that's very important. And like Bob said earlier, two of the things that are most important to a jobber is to control his inventory and control his pricing. So we felt like this was a good, logical place to start the webinars on Autologue. Keep an eye on your mailbox, your email. Normally I send out the invitations on Monday, and we'll be having different topics probably for the next month on Autologue, trying to address certain areas that we believe are important. We certainly invite anybody's input and comments on both how you liked it, maybe something that you didn't quite understand, maybe something that we didn't mention or talk about that you have a question about. Bob and I are always available for questions, for individual go-to-meeting sessions, to where we'll go in and we'll demo a section for you, and give you very specific instructions on it on a customer-by-customer basis. We know that all of you have your own business model and plan, and your business might be a little different than mine or Bob's or anybody's, but please call us. We want everybody to become very proficient at using their Autologue. I really can't think of anything else to say, except this will be on our website tomorrow.
Any last questions?
I don't think so. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for your time. We ran a little bit over. We appreciate your attention. And like I said, please email us with any comments or questions that you may have, and we'll be glad to answer them for you. And again, thanks again. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Good job.